Hey everyone, I'm Rather Incoherent, and I'm an old Hearthstone player who played way back in open beta, and I'm going to be coming back to Hearthstone in the upcoming core set rotation when the Festival of Legends drops in 2023. I'm making this short video to recap where I am in Hearthstone and how much I played back in the day and what I've been doing in the month I've been back, because I haven't been playing competitively in Standard, because that would require me to get years of cards that are about to rotate out. So I've just been building dust and doing other stuff. Let's talk about all of that, where I've been, what I've been doing, and where I intend to go. This video will largely focus on Frost Death Knight and how it compares to the stuff from the past. But before I get there, let's briefly overcap what my past has been. You can see I'm a Warlock main. I joined the game, Zoo was the free-to-play deck, and it seems like Frost Death Knight is probably the free-to-play deck these days. But back in the day, Zoo is what got me into the game, and then I would play other Warlock decks and other aggro decks and branch out, but I was always a Warlock main, and if I played Control or anything else, there were always other cool Control Warlocks too. Thinking back on it, several of my favorite decks were Control Warlocks, the likes of Malygos Lock and Q-Block. I've always really enjoyed the janky combo Warlock builds. You can also see that there's a clear second place in Druid. I never really liked playing Ramp Druid that much. I sort of just felt like I would draw Wild Growth or not, and that would largely determine the win rate. There was more to it than that, but it mostly came down to the RNG of the draw with Ramp Druid. I felt like there were a lot of matchups because of how common aggro was on the ladder, where Ramp Druid was just kind of devoid of skill expression for me. However, Token Druid. If you want to be devoid of skill expression, Token Druid's a lot more fun, because somebody dies on turn 4. That's way more fun than slowly getting beaten to death and giving up on turn 8. So while I played a lot of Druid, I tend to play Druid and always think I'm going to like Druid, but I don't really have good things to say about Druid. Token Druid is all in with every build I've ever seen. You're just going nonstop, assuming you'll draw something, and then you're out of cards and someone's dead on turn 4. And Ramp Druid is just praying to God for ramp. And oh god, one of the things I'm happiest about coming back this year is that I appear to have skipped some of the most degenerate Ramp Druid nonsense in the history of Hearthstone in this last set rotation. Outside that, you can see I played a load of Mage and Hunter, relatively even split with less Rogue and Priest being my clear least favorite. The few wins I have in Demon Hunter is just representative of them not having been in the game for most of my playtime, and when I came back and Forged in the Barrens, I played a lot of Demon Hunter relative to other classes, but didn't play for that long. And then when I've come back this time, I've gotten over 100 wins on Death Knight. I've played pretty exclusively Standard as Frost Death Knight, and that's not because I think that it's the coolest or best deck. It does seem to be cool, it's new and interesting, but mostly because it's the deck that you can get pretty much complete at a competitive level with almost no gold investment. Before I go over to the decks I've been playing, I do want to briefly talk about this other stuff. I played a lot of arenas when I first started. I've tried out Battlegrounds and didn't particularly enjoy them. Apparently I've tried out duels. I don't remember trying out duels. What does it mean to have a 0 here but have wins? I don't understand. It doesn't matter, that's what it means. And I've been AFKing in bounties since I got back in the game. This isn't a mode that I actually enjoy, this is just how you get dust these days. So sure, it's a thing I'm doing, I guess. But mostly I want to talk about these three. Now this Legend rank in Classic is kind of worthless, because if anyone knows anything, it's that Classic mode is a sham, it's just filled with bots. I assumed that it would have been fixed, so the videos for months old, but it's just a travesty. I went to go play some nostalgic Zoo Warlock, and the first couple of games were good. They were people who were at Bronze rank 10, like Wild Mode. They had just started playing for the first time. But once you get past the people who've just started, you encounter people who've been playing for a while, like the bots. And the bots encompassed, I would say, all but 2 or 3 games from Bronze something up to Diamond 1. To get into Legend, I had to fight real people. That was it. I was honestly expecting to get decently high into Legend before I encountered humans, but no, you do have to beat real humans just to get into Legend, thankfully. They all seemed as surprised to see me as I was to see them. I'm not sure if their decks were built to beat bots or if they were playing real meta decks, but either way they got steamrolled by Zoo, and my win rate was something like 90... I think my win rate was 100%, but I had 4 losses right at the start when I was encountering real humans at Bronze 10, where I was I had 10 to 15 games against real people. And I had real win rates against them, and they're just bots on cruise control all the way to Legend. It was a travesty. Over here in Standard rank, I have exclusively played Frost Death Knight, and the reason for that pretty much just comes down to the fact that I don't have cards. I'm not going to craft cards from expansions that are going away. And if you come check out this Frost Death Knight deck, you're going to see that everything in here is something that is not rotating. And in fact, it's pretty much all either a core card or from the Path to Arthas, which makes it really cheap to get. I believe this is the exact deck that was posted a few weeks back on the Vicious Syndicate report, except once the ETC came out, I swapped out one of my Mites of Minithil for an ETC with the second Mite of Minithil inside of it. A lot of the times I felt like I had a 4-drop situation where I didn't have board control and the weapon wasn't helpful, so I couldn't play Construct Quarter or Mite, and the 4-mana 4/4 would have been actually an improvement over my deck in those situations. Likewise, in a lot of matchups, you don't need the second Mite of Minithil, it's not helpful at all, especially if you've drawn the first one already. Astalor is a card that could probably just be in the main deck, but I just threw it in here because I was like, yeah, why not? I may as well be running Astalor here. I'm sure there'll be matchups where having some extra damage is helpful, and that has been true. It's the usual default pick. And Remorseless Winter is here in case I'm losing board control hard. Maybe I can throw down the ETC, they'll ignore it, go face, I can Remorseless Winter and fight the board back. So far, this has literally never been helpful except for one time where I used it for 2 damage past taunt, which, yeah, there were other ways to do that, so hardly mattered. But this deck is really reminiscent to me of old school mid-range Hunter around the time of Naxxramas, where the deck was really fast and could kill you very effectively, and that does happen here. There are openings where you have like Bonebreaker or Foul Egg, into 2-drop, into 3-drop, into 4-drop, and then you find stuff to combo together, you Pyroblast them on 6 with Mirror Manipulator like you do, you freeze their board and you beat them to death. It's got really gross fast openings just like the old school mid-range Hunters decks do, but because of all the Discover with things like Frost Strike and Vizier, and then all of the draw with Harbinger of Winter, Chillfall, and Baron, there's the ability for this deck to go very, very long and outvalue a lot of decks that think they're the control deck. And they are, theoretically, in a super long game, they might eventually win, but you're able to go a much longer time than you might initially think with this deck. It's not remotely necessary to go full face from the beginning. And I think that's why I've been enjoying enough to hit Legend with it, is because originally I just made decks like, oh, I need to play cards, I need to go get competitive games with Death Knight to do quests, sure, why not? But this is like the exact sort of aggro deck that I enjoy the most, where it's got a lot of questions about how you should be playing out Foul Egg, whether or not it should be sacked immediately, whether or not you hold this 1-drop just because you need something to play out in conjunction with the Contract Quarter, or you play it out for tempo now. When do you go in with Frostworm's Fury? What do you discover off of the Viziers and the Frost Strikes? It has a lot of little room for skill expression on your side. I can understand if someone plays against this and just hates it and thinks it's degenerate itself, because I'm about to get into all the things that just seem wild to me as a returning player that I've gotten used to. But on the whole, this is the exact kind of deck that I really enjoyed. It's reminiscent of my favorite types of zoo with like the Void Wakers. Is that what they were called? The Void Callers? The 4-mana 3/4 that Death Rattle summon a demon from your hand. That was my favorite variant of zoo. And then my favorite variants of Hunter were the ones that seamlessly curved out into high main and actually had the fuel to keep going for a little while after the high main dropped. And this reminds me of that a lot, where I've got that same sort of dangerous tempo sometimes, but most of the times I'm actually planning on fighting you for board pretty much all game and not winning before turn 7 on the vast majority of games. Now let's talk about things that blew my mind coming back to Hearthstone. Horn of Winter stands out to me as a card where I'm like, man, really though? You're just gonna give me Innervate like that? And I know I can't ramp above my current mana with it. If I'm at 3, I can't go to 5. But the ability to just be in a situation where I'm like on turn 4 discovering with Nerubian Vizier with a second Vizier in my hand, I'm like, you know what? These all suck. I'll just take the Horn of Winter, play it, and play the second Vizier and try again. There are so many times where Horn of Winter allows you to get a lot of tempo. Like, of course it does. It's Mana Cheat. I'm just sort of surprised to see Mana Cheat still getting printed, and it turns out that no, this isn't unique. Mana Cheat is everywhere, and it's downright degenerate. One of the more interesting things in this deck is I actually find myself very frequently not having good openings. You've only got one actual 2-drop. Your actual 1-drops are Arms Dealer, and that's sort of it. Foul Egg isn't great on its own unless you also have Skeletal Sidekick. Skeletal Sidekick isn't good unless you have Foul Egg or Arms Dealer. The opening of this deck is just a little bit jank, and it's probably a deck that threatens getting very dominant if other decks don't improve, and it does, because it loses nothing going into rotation, really. Bonebreaker's wild to me. Fiery War Axe got nerfed from 2 to 3 mana. This is a 1-mana card with 1 less attack than Fiery War Axe that also just deals 4 damage to face. Like, what's going on? Why is this so strong? Bonebreaker is low-key one of the strongest cards in the deck, but one of the grossest things about the deck is, even though I'm just a full balls-to-wall aggro deck in a lot of matchups, I'm playing like Harbinger of Winter into Nerubian Vizier. All the cards I'm flooding the board with just draw more cards and don't actually run me out of tempo in any way, or run me out of steam rather. They are kind of running me out of tempo because 2 mana 2/2 and 3 mana 2/4, not really the best numbers. But it's a really gross thing, this cluster of cards here, where I'm just getting so much value while fighting for board. I will mention that these 3 cards are also the reason the Undead Priest matchup feels unwinnable. This deck doesn't deal with 4/3s very well, and Undead Priest isn't just a very viable, very competitive deck, it is a board-centric matchup for aggro decks, and all of its minions are 4/3s, and all of my minions have 2 attack and less than 5 health, so it's just brutal. That matchup is borderline auto loss. ETC Band Manager is definitely the card that stands out to me as one of my favorite Hearthstone cards, just period. It seems like the sort of thing that's never going to be crazy broken. It might become ubiquitous, it might be a situation where everyone runs this, it might not. But it feels like a tremendous skill expression card that I really enjoy. In my case, I was like, the second Might of Menethil tends to suck. So I'll put the second Might of Menethil inside of ETC, and then I'll get something else most of the time. In my experience, I almost always pick Acid Lore because it gives you so much more burst, so much more board presence, it gives you access to a little bit of healing. It's just a very, very strong and flexible card that very oftentimes is a completely reasonable pick off the ETC, especially if I'm running out of steam if I don't have any of my big endgame cards. Remorseless Winter is just here because, like, maybe I need an AoE board clear. I've never picked this. It should be something else, don't know what it should be. Probably would be better off if it were Acidic Swamp Ooze, but there's definitely something it should be instead of this. It's never been correct so far. School Teacher just feels like a crazy card to me. School Teacher is a 4 mana 4/4 battle cry, discover a spell that costs 3 or less, and then get it for 1 mana attached to a 1 mana 1/1 body. Like, Chillwind Yeti, rest in peace. I knew you'd get power crept out of the game, but dear God, is School Teacher a tremendously better card. Frostworm's Fury is obviously a terrifying and exceptional card. Frost Nova, summon a 5/5 fireball all in one. Like, yeah, that's a little bit nuts. That's the sort of card you use to push an archetype. Overseer Frigidara is also just terrifying. It's Arcane Intellect plus Consecrate plus a 5/6 body for 6. The top end of this deck is just nuts in terms of the raw value it gets, and nobody's a greater offender than Maro Manipulator. To say that this is a 6 mana 5/5 Battlecry Pyroblast the Face is actually an understatement of how good it is, or an overstatement. It tends to be far more relevant that it is able to kill the board in a positive way. Dealing 2 damage randomly for 5 corpses, you don't always have the corpses, that's true. There are situations where if it just hit face, the card would be vastly better, but there's also a ton of situations where you're fighting for board with your opponent, Maro Manipulator comes down, it clears the board, it deals 4 to face, it plays a 5/5, and it just breaks their back. Maro Manipulator is wild to me. The entire top end of the deck is, really. This is the sort of deck where if it had better early game and any 5-drop, it would just be the best deck in the game. I can see why it's competitively one of the best decks currently, and I'm surprised that it's not literally everywhere, because it really just is the core set and Arthas, I think. I think you need to craft School Teachers, I think I had to craft one of them. Like, you don't need a lot to get this whole deck, so I'm surprised it's not as common as Old Zoo. I did not see that many Frost Death Knights, I saw far more Unholy and weirdly Blood, despite the fact that as far as I can tell competitively, everyone agrees Blood isn't that good. I think it's just that Blood is the closest thing to a control deck currently in the game. An old school control deck where your win condition is just, I have 1,000,000 health, you die in fatigue. And also they can accelerate fatigue because they have Mograine, which is neat. One of the things that surprised me the most coming back is just the simple fact, why am I pressing arrows like a child? I cannot believe that Bran Bronzebeard and to a lesser degree Reno are in the core set right now. I'm hoping Bran is rotated out because, like, you know, maybe this effect is a little bit degenerate and all it does is let combo decks kill people in one turn most of the time. That's just what it seems to be doing, is the main use it has in this meta is to, you know, kill someone with 4 copies of Astalor. I will note a quick thing before I move off of this deck. Maro Manipulator with Bran Bronzebeard is a thing that is terrifying, and I see a lot of people, not a lot of people, I've seen people talk about it online. I've run into one person at least who was running Maro Manipulator and Bran. And my opinion of that is that it's terrible. Because generally speaking, if you're in a situation where you have enough corpses to Bran Bronzebeard your Maro Manipulator, something's gone terribly wrong. The game doesn't tend to play out that way. The guy I encountered in the mirror that had the Bran got crushed, and I had to think at least some part of it was that he was running Bran. because he got next to no value out of his brand and lost board control because he was running it instead of presumably something that helps with board. If I had to point that finger at something, I would assume it's some of these 1-drops that had to get cut, or a 3-drop. But whatever it was something he could have played on curve to fight me with, and instead he was going for this combo that really shouldn't happen due to the requirements of Corpses. I understand the appeal. Boy, how do you understand the appeal, because Mirror Manipulator is, in my opinion, the best card in the deck. Which is crazy with how stacked Frostworm's Fury, Overseer for Jadar, and Horn of Winter are. But Mirror Manipulator is just an absolutely wild card. There's a reason it's got 3 symbols, unlike Frigidara and Horn of Winter. If you aren't full Frost, you can't be allowed to have shit like this. This is just not okay. I feel like if they have 3 runes, it's basically the developer saying we're pushing this as hard as we possibly can. At least that's my experience with Frost. Who knows? Maybe all the 3 rune Unholy and Blood cards are terrible, but that seems unlikely. And before I leave, a couple of notes on the stuff that's currently in the meta and how I feel about it. I'm so happy I never had to play with Wild Heart Guff. I just look at this and my heart sinks. I'm like, cool. A card where if you draw it on turn 5 or turn 10, the game is fundamentally completely different. Great, really looking forward to that dictating how my Druid games go. I mentioned, I guess at the start of the video, that Druids have always felt super draw dependent and like it really dictated their games. And this is it's that taken to the extreme. This looks insanely powerful. It looks like a core ramp Druid card that would never go away as long as it's in Standard, and it just looks so frustrating both to play against or with. You play your deck that has Guff and you don't get it on 5 and it's a feels bad, or you play against a Druid and they coin Guff you on 4 and it's just brutal. This thing is insane. I'm so glad. Like, I know there are other scammier, more toxic cards, but Wild Heart Guff is just the single card that I am the happiest to not have to deal with by skipping this rotation entirely. On the other end of the spectrum, it's very weird to me that when we come over to the Data Reaper podcast for Shamans, there's not anything under decks. And it's the same with Warriors. Oh wait, we're finally tentatively giving them Enraged Warrior. It's because these classes have just been so unplayable that there's not a competitive reason to give you a Shaman deck. Like, we can give you 30 cards that are playable in a Shaman deck, but we can't give you a competitive Shaman deck, so we did it. That's what this is saying. And that's heartbreaking, right? Like, apparently, since I've stopped playing, something really good has happened as Blizzard's design philosophy has changed, and now the devs are much more likely to make balance changes much more quickly. Apparently just not the balance changes that make Shaman or Warrior playable, which is unfortunate. As my play rate earlier implies, I'm not too beat up about not getting to play Warrior or Shaman right now, and hopefully the next expansion will fix them, although thus far with the card reveals it doesn't seem that way. I'm still sad to see 2 classes being completely unplayable. As I was editing the video, it occurred to me I should probably show off the deck and actually play a game with it, huh? That's what you do when you make videos in Hearthstone. You play the game? A wild concept, I know. But let's get a game in. I did play 2 just now. I was planning on picking one of them to air, and then I realized I was still in the deck view, which is not great footage, so our games against Svalna Priest and terrible Murloc Shaman will not be getting aired. We'll be going with this deck against probably Pure Paladin. And I'm sad to say the only thing more heartbreaking for me than seeing there was no Shaman listed deck on Vicious Syndicate was witnessing firsthand why there wasn't one. I wish I could air that, but it's in a teeny tiny squinto vision. It would have been like this the whole time, which is honestly not as bad as I thought it was. That's almost airable, except you literally can't see his hand size. This is Bonebreaker lining up really well, but do I want to coin out Nerubian Vizier? Doesn't seem very good.
Your soul is mine.
I could have coined out Vizier and then just not played Bonebreaker. I could have coined out Vizier and held on to the Horn of Winter and the Bonebreaker. Already? What's in your hand? Why is that correct? Surely there was a better play than that. I am in the dumpster. Like, I don't know what ranks in Legend are good, but I assume it's not 8,000. Right on time, Harbinger of Winter, right on time. We're at the point where I'm holding coin to Frostworm's Fury on 6. I'm definitely playing this first, and I'm almost certainly picking removal given the option, because I know he's gonna have big minions I need to grind through. And then we're gonna Horn of Winter for tempo and throw out this Harbinger as well. It seems really weird to order in the court that quickly. surely his hand isn't good enough to justify that. Is it so bad that he's cutting his losses? That seems genuinely terrible. 6/5's rather large, so that's what he dredged with C4 Savior. My plan of coining Frostworm's Fury isn't good. If I need to use coin for this teacher, I can't obliterate that 6/5, it's too much. Nerubian Vizier for Frost Strike seems like the best option. There's several other 3 damage options. None of these are good ones. Blood Boil is definitely wrong. Plagued Grain would seem more reasonable if I actually had a Mario Manipulator. I'm not gonna plan on that. So it's gotta be Army of the Dead. And that means it's Coin Obliterate, which I despise. But that's where we're at.
Be merciful.
I don't know much of the meta. I've mostly avoided looking things up because it would take a lot of time and effort, and most of it's rotating very soon. So I don't know what holy spells would even be in his deck. Thinking back on this, I'm not sure he actually gets very much carry value at all. But even if I just let it stick around and the value doesn't matter, it's getting 6/5, just like good trades on my board. I can't deal with it. It feels like I have to obliterate there. Is he 2 Light Ray yet? No, nowhere near. His Light Rays are currently 5 mana. 6 mana. That seems very early. Anyway, Frostworm's Fury is our plan later, but it's not our plan now. We can freeze, get rid of the shield, and go face, and that seems like the only sensible thing. We can also start trading in, get the draw off of this. I'm not sure what I can draw that would be relevant is the issue. This has been an incredibly awkward draw. I can kill it with Plague Strike. That full spends my mana, gets me bodies on the board now. Okay, I like killing it and using the Plague Strike to do so. It sucks, but this is not a matchup that I get to win by rushing them down ahead of time. Like, it has literally never played out that way in my experience. Even when I seemed like I drew the nuts and they drew nothing, they'll still manage to hold together with Light Rays and actually stop me from getting everything done on time, no matter how hard I try. Especially with this opening, I just haven't gotten off to a particularly quick start, so I have to imagine that I'm playing the value game here, thus the Army of the Dead. But, I did not get a good enough connection of the middle of the curve there. I feel, frankly, pretty dead. Not because of this. This is fine. The thing... Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? And you're only the next one? Oh, his Frostworms... Not his Frostworms. His Light Rays didn't come down that turn. That's incredibly good for me. That's going to be Construct Quarter, Frost Strike.
Death.
I can do Construct Quarter here to do 4 and 1 into this, and then Frost Strike. I think that's the play. It loses me the minimal amount of damage while simultaneously killing the one thing he could potentially use to be racing me. Probably Frost Queen's Endragosa here. Can't really imagine it's anything else. Then we go face for damage. And now we get into the awkward part where I don't know if he has healing. If I can suicide my whole board, I can never do that because Frostworm's Fury isn't a summon creatures, unfortunately. Could I have just went to set up lethal there? If I had, instead of trading in, just put... No, that was only 1 damage on my board that I missed. That was 3 to minions and then 4 with Rush. I would only have put into 7. There was no way to set up lethal there other than... Nope, even Hero Power doesn't do it. I've got no additional burn in hand. That was as far as I could push my damage. One thing I've been particularly bad about since I got back to the game is like counting my damage every turn. I just sort of been winging it and it's sort of been fine, but turns like that where I'm like, oh, right, he's got 8 health. Could I have done any damage outside of that? And it looks like the answer was no. Not convinced of that, though. Do you get to see your Discover pools? No, you don't. Well, it got him a random Frost spell, at least. Oh, god damn, that is painful. That's what you got? So, as I said earlier, there's no way for me to kill this. There's too much taunt between me and that. That's just scammed. Like, there's plenty of legendaries that can help him stay alive, but this is the only one that life steals for, like, double-digit amounts of health. If I Syndragosa twice, I can kill this on the first one, set up a board with 13 damage on it. I might be able to push lethal by doing this. There might actually be a way out. I can kill this, sit on my chicken for the time being. I need to Syndragosa again, or sorry, Frostworm again. There's a lot of taunt in the way, but Syndragosa clears most of it. I think I'm just dead. That is incorrect. I know that's the most important minion, but you don't need health. Oh, you don't. You need your health, and you need the Divine Shield in your taunt. That was so incorrect. So now we Frostworm's Fury again. This one drop's actually incredibly relevant. Yeah, I think we just win. That's not true. We died to a quality Consecrate, even though he's been drawing top first, right? I'm pretty sure that's what actually happens. Oh, interesting. I don't have the room for the wings right now. I do have the damage to kill him, despite that. As long as I don't lose 2 minions. If I lose any 2 minions, I think I'm okay. That's fine. Like I said, I can lose any 2 minions, I think. And as long as the damage goes face, it's all the same to me. Syndragosa, hero power, that's actually a win. My opponent may now consider himself counter-scammed. I would like to call this a good game and a reminder of why you should enjoy Hearthstone for the skill-based competitive card game that it is. Anyways, I've been Rather Coherent. I hope you enjoyed this clown fiesta. If you did, like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff really does help the channel grow. And I'll see you in the next one. I've been enjoying Hearthstone a lot more this time around, now that I no longer take it competitively seriously.